हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। तो आज के वीडियो में हम देखने वाले हैं एनसीईआरटी पॉलिटी क्लास 10, जिसमें आज हम देखेंगे चैप्टर नंबर 8 जो कि है चैलेंजेस टू डेमोक्रेसी। तो शुरू करते हैं हमारा आज का चैप्टर। This concluding chapter draws upon all that you have learned in the last 2 years so as to address the fundamental questions of democratic politics. What are the challenges that democracy faces in our country and elsewhere? What can be done to reform democratic in our country and elsewhere? What can be done to reform democratic politics? How can our democracy become more democratic in its practice and outcomes? This chapter does not answer these questions. It only makes some suggestions about the way in which we can approach the questions of challenges and reforms. It invites you to think on your own and come up with your own reading of the challenges, your recipe of how to overcome these, and your own definition of democracy. Thinking about challenges. Do you remember the chapters of your political science textbook of class 9? There we tracked the expansion of democracy all over the world. Our reading thereafter has confirmed our initial impression. Democracy is the dominant form of government in the contemporary world. It does not face a serious challenge or rival. Yet our explorations of various dimensions of democratic politics has shown us something else as well. The promise of democracy is far from realized anywhere in the world. Democracy does not have a challenger, but that does not mean that it does not face any challenges. At different points in this tour of democracy, we have noted the serious challenges that democracy faces all over the world. A challenge is not just any problem. We usually call only those difficulties a challenge which are significant and which can be overcome. A challenge is a difficulty that carries within it an opportunity for progress. Once we overcome a challenge, we go up to a higher level than before. Different countries face different kinds of challenges. At least 1/4 of the globe is still not under democratic government. The challenge for democracy in these parts of the world is very stark. This country face the foundational challenge of making the transition to democracy and then instituting democratic government. This involves bringing down the existing non-democratic regime, keeping military away from controlling government, and establishing a sovereign and functional state. Most of the established democracies face the challenge of expansion. This involves applying the basic principle of democratic government across all the regions, different social groups, and various institutions, ensuring greater power to local governments, extension of federal principle to all the units of the federation, inclusion of women and minority groups, etc., falls under this challenge. This also means that less and less decisions should remain outside the arena of democratic control. Most countries, including India and other democracies like the US, face this challenge. The third challenge of deepening of democracy is faced by every democracy in one form or another. This involves strengthening of the institutions and practices of democracy. This should happen in such a way that people can realize their expectations of democracy. But ordinary people have different expectations from democracy in different societies. Therefore, this challenge takes different meanings and paths in different parts of the world. In general terms, it usually means strengthening those institutions that help people's participation and control. This requires an attempt to bring down the control and influence of the rich and powerful people in making governmental decisions. We have noted or hinted at these challenges in all the various examples and stories that we studied in our textbook of class 9 and in the earlier chapters of this book. Let us go back to all the major stops in our tour of democracy, refresh our memory, and note down the challenges that democracy faces in each of these. Different contexts, different challenges. Each of these cartoons represents a challenge to democracy. Please describe what the challenge is. Also, place it in one of the three categories mentioned in the first section. तो ये कार्टून आपको फिल करना है. इसमें फर्स्ट कार्टून में दिखाया है मुबारक री इलेक्टेड, सेकेंड में है सीइंग द डेमोक्रेसी, थर्ड में है लिबरल जेंडर इक्वलिटी और फोर्थ में है कैंपेन मनी. तो इसमें केस एंड कॉन्टेक्स्ट को लेके डेमोक्रेसी का डेफिनेशन देना है. तो ये सब आप फिल कर सकते हैं. इसमें दिए हैं मैक्सिको, चाइना, पाकिस्तान, इराक, साउथ अफ्रीका, यूएस, ग्वांटानामो बे, सऊदी अरबिया, यूगोस्लोविया, और इधर है बेल्जियम, श्रीलंका, यूएस, सिविल राइट्स, नॉर्दर्न आयरलैंड, नेपाल, बोलिविया. Different types of challenges. Now that you have noted down all these challenges, let us group these together into some broad categories. Given below are some spheres or sides of democratic politics. You may place against each of these the specific challenges that you noted for one or more countries or cartoons in the previous section. In addition to that, write one item for India for each of these spheres. In case you find that some challenges do not fit into any of the categories given below, you can create new categories and put some items under that. तो इससे पहले जो कार्टून और कंट्रीज़ का दिया है उसको कैटेगरीज में यहाँ पर डिवाइड करना है. कंस्टिट्यूशनल डिज़ाइन, डेमोक्रेटिक राइट्स, वर्किंग ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूशंस, इलेक्शंस, फेडरलिज्म, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन, एकोमोडेशन ऑफ डाइवर्सिटी, पॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस और एनी अदर category. Let us group this again, this time by nature of these challenges as per the classification suggested in the first section. For each of these categories, find at least one example from India as well. Foundational challenge, challenge of expansion, challenge of deepening. Now let us think only about India. Think of all the challenges that democracy faces in contemporary India. List those 5 that should be addressed first of all. The listing should be in the order of priority. That means the challenge you find most important or pressing should be mentioned at number 1 and so on. Give one example of the challenge and your reasons for assessing it the priority. Thinking about political reforms. Each of these challenges is linked to the possibility of reforms. As mentioned above, we discuss challenges only because we think these can be overcome. Generally, all the suggestions or proposals about overcoming various challenges to democracy are called democracy reform or political reform. We are not going to give here a list of desirable political reforms, for there cannot be any such list. If all the countries do not have the same challenges, it follows that everyone cannot follow the same recipe of political reforms. We cannot prescribe a procedure for car repair without knowing which model the car is, what the defect is, and what tools are available, where the car has broken down, etc. Can we at least have a list of such reforms for our country in today's context? We can develop some proposals for reforms at the national level, but the real challenge of reforms may not lie at the national level. Some of the crucial questions need to be thought at the state or local level. Besides, such a list may become irrelevant after some time. So instead of that, let us think of some broad guidelines that can be kept in mind while devising ways and means for political reforms in India. It is very tempting to think of legal ways of reforming politics, to think of new laws to ban undesirable things. But this temptation needs to be resisted. No doubt, law has an important role to play in political reform. Carefully devised changes in law can help to discourage wrong political practices and encourage good ones. But legal constitutional changes by themselves cannot overcome challenges to democracy. This is like the rules of cricket. A change in rules for LBW decisions help to reduce negative betting tactics. But no one would ever think that the quality of cricket could be improved mainly through changes in the rules. This is to be done mainly by the players, coaches, and administrators. Similarly, democratic reforms are to be carried out mainly by political activists, parties, movements, and politically conscious citizens. Any legal change must carefully look at what results it will have on politics. Sometimes the results may be counterproductive. For example, many states have banned people who have more than two children from contesting panchayat elections. This has resulted in denial of democratic opportunity to many poor and women, which was not intended. Generally, laws that seek to ban something are not very successful in politics. Laws that give political actors incentives to do good things have more chances of working. The best laws are those which empower people to carry out democratic reforms. The Right to Information Act is a good example of a law that empowers the people to find out what is happening in government and act as watchdogs of democracy. Such a law helps to control corruption and supplements the existing laws that ban corruption and impose strict penalties. Democratic reforms are to be brought about principally through political practice. Therefore, the main focus of political reforms should be on ways to strengthen democratic practice. As we discussed in the chapter on political parties, the most important concern should be to increase and improve the quality of political participation by ordinary citizens. Any proposal for political reform should think not only about what is a good solution but also about who will implement it and how. It is not very wise to think that the legislatures will pass legislations that go against the interest of all the political parties and MPs, but measures that rely on democratic movements, citizens' organizations, and the media are likely to succeed. Let us keep these general guidelines in mind and look at some specific instances of challenges to democracy that require some measure of reform. Let us try to come up with some concrete proposals of reform. Here are some challenges that require political reforms. Discuss these challenges in detail. Study the reform option offered here and give your preferred solution with reasons. Remember that none of the options offered here is right or wrong. You can opt for a mix of more than one options or come up with something that is not offered here. But you must give your solution in detail and offer reasons for your choice. Doctors' absenteeism challenge. Uttar Pradesh government got a survey done and found out that most of the doctors posted in the rural primary health centers are simply not there. They live in a town, carry out private practice, and visit the village where they are posted only once or twice in the entire month. Villagers have to travel to towns and pay very high fee to private doctors even for common ailments. Reform proposals. The government should make it compulsory for the doctors to live in the village where they are posted, otherwise the service should be terminated. District administration and police should carry out surprise raids to check the attendance of the doctors. Village panchayat should be given the power to write the annual report of the doctor, which should be read out in the Gram Sabha meeting. Problems like this can be solved only if Uttar Pradesh is split into several smaller states which can be administered more efficiently. Political funding challenge. On an average, every candidate who contested the last Lok Sabha elections owned a property of more than rupees 1 crore. There is a fear that only wealthy people or those with their support can afford to fight elections. Most of the political parties are dependent in money given by big business houses. The worry is that the role of money in politics will reduce whatever little voice the poor have in our democracy. Reform proposals. The financial accounts of every political party should be made public. These accounts should be examined by government auditors. There should be state funding of elections. Parties should be given some money by the government to meet their election expenditure. Citizens should be encouraged to give more donations to parties and to political workers. Such donations should be exempt from income tax. Reforming politics. Rose managed to catch Madame Lindong outside the classroom, something she had been planning to do for some time. Ma'am, I really liked that Canadian cartoon. Rose needed something to open the conversation. Which one? Madame Lindong could not recall. Ma'am, the one who says 98% Canadians want all the politicians to be locked in the trunk of a car and thrown into Niagara Falls. I was thinking of our politician. We would need a bigger vehicle and a river as mighty as Brahmaputra. Lindong ma'am smiled at Rose. Like most Indians, she is also very much unhappy with the way politicians of our country has been behaving and running the parties and governments. But she wanted Rose to appreciate the complexity of the problem. Do you think our problems will be solved if we get rid of our politicians? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Aren't these mean politicians responsible for all the problems in our country? I mean, corruption, defection, casteism, communal violence, criminality, everything. Lingdong, madam. So, all we need is to get rid of the current lot. Are you sure that those who replace them will not do this thing? Rose. Well, I had not thought of it. But maybe not. Maybe we will get leaders of better character. Lingdong, ma'am. I agree with you that the situation will change if people show more care and alertness to reject corrupt and bad politicians and elect the right ones. And maybe all politicians are not corrupt. How can you say that, ma'am? Interrupted Rose. Lindong, madam. I did not say that politicians are not corrupt. Maybe when you think of politician, you think of these big people whose photos appear in newspapers. I think of political leaders that I have known. I don't think that political leaders I know are more corrupt than my own colleagues, government officials, contractors, or other middle class professionals that I know. The corruption of the politician is more visible, and we get the impression that all politicians are corrupt. Some of them are, and some of them are not. Rose did not give up. Ma'am, what I mean is that there should be strict laws to curb corruption and wrong practices like appeals to caste and community. Lingdong, madam. I am not sure, Rose. For one thing, there is already a law banning any appeal to caste and religion in politics. Politicians find a way to bypass that. Laws can have little impact unless people resist attempts to mislead and divide people in the name of caste and religion. You cannot have democracy in a real sense unless people and politicians overcome the barriers of caste and religion. Redefining democracy. We began this tour of democracy last year with a minimal definition of democracy. Do you remember that? This is what chapter 2 of your textbook said last year. Democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. We then looked at many cases and expanded the definition slightly to add some qualification. The ruler elected by the people must take all the major decisions. Election must offer a choice and fair opportunity to the people to change the current rulers. This choice and opportunity should be available to all the people on an equal basis, and the exercise of this choice must lead to a government limited by basic rules of the Constitution and citizens' rights. You may have felt disappointed that the definition did not refer to any high ideals that we associated with democracy. But in operational terms, we deliberately started with a minimalist but clear definition of democracy. It allowed us to make a clear distinction between democratic and non democratic regimes. You may have noticed that in the course of our discussions of various aspects of democratic government and politics, we have gone beyond that definition. We discussed democratic rights at length and noted that these rights are not limited to the right to vote, stand in elections, form political organizations, We discuss some social and economic rights that a democracy should offer to the citizens. We take up power sharing as the spirit of democracy and discussed how power sharing between governments and social groups is necessary in a democracy. We saw how democracy cannot be the brute rule of majority and how a respect for minority voice is necessary for democracy. Our discussion of democracy has gone beyond the government and its activities. We discussed how eliminating discrimination based on caste, religion, and gender is important in a democracy. Finally, we have had some discussion about some outcomes that one can expect from a democracy. In doing so, we have not gone against the definition of democracy offered last year. We began then with the definition of what is the minimum a country must have to be called a democracy. In the course of our discussion, we moved to the set of desirable conditions that a democracy should have. We have moved from the definition of democracy to the description of a good democracy. How do we define a good democracy? What are its features? Which are the features a democracy must have to be called a good democracy? And what must not take place in a democracy if it is a good democracy? You decide that. Here is your space for writing your own definition of good democracy. How did you like this exercise? Was it enjoyable, very demanding, a little frustrating, and a little scary? Are you a little resentful that the textbook did not help you in these crucial tasks? Are you worried that your definition may not be correct? Here then is your last lesson in thinking about democracy. There is no fixed definition of good democracy. A good democracy is what we think it is and what we wish to make it. This may sound strange, yet think of it. Is it democratic for someone to dictate to us what a good democracy is? तो ये इस बुक का लास्ट चैप्टर था। तो इसी के साथ हमारा आज क्लास 10 का बुक कंप्लीट हो गया है। तो अगर आप चैनल पर नए हैं तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और नोटिफिकेशन आइकन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए ताकि आपको सारे वीडियोस के अपडेट्स मिल सके। और अगर आपको वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो लाइक कर दीजिए, साथ ही अपने दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिए ताकि उन्हें भी हेल्प हो सके। तो हमारा आज का ये वीडियो यहीं तक था। थैंक यू, थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग।